give us the real thing. I have a few ogas, so one of them, a former high-placed Nigerian topmost leader in this country, is an APC, and many in the last two elections before the last one, he was appointed to coordinate the whole South. So I called him and said, let me help you, sir, to maximize. I did a strategy plan for him, and then I called a meeting of all these APC bigwigs, governors, and so on and so forth. I was there. So one of the former governors from South said, Sam, I'm happy you're with us. I said, well, I kept quiet. So after that meeting, I never came again until they won the election. So when I met him, he said, hey, Sam, why did you run away? I said, well, sir, I came as a strategist, once Oga, always Oga, to help you get control. But once people started talking about how to election strategy, then I know that you are very close to crime, that I pulled away. He said, you're stupid. He said, well, I knew that you are close to crime. What I did was to help you gain control. And I have to leave because I'm Oga. I'm not with you in the party. So I just wanted to reinforce what our chairman said. I once said that in Nigeria, in every election, it's a strategy. But in Nigeria, the strategy is very simple. And it's all about crime, buy INEC, buy judiciary, buy security, and you are home and dry. I still stand by that observation. And I hope in 2027, I will change the Nigerian strategy formula, which is with something else. So that's by way of anecdote. I would like to go straight to read the beginning of my speech, then I get towards the end. I will just explain a few things. So I said that the gravest threat to free and fair election in Nigeria in 2007 is cynicism. It is not the corrupt INEC. It is not the compromised judiciary. It is not the partisan security agencies. The gravest threat to free and fair election in 2027 is crippling and widespread cynicism that leads to inaction or ineffective action. My fear for 2027 general election is that we have given up on the possibility of a free and fair election in 2027. That is the biggest fear I have. We'll come back to talk about what's free and fair election, what it means and requires. But in the meantime, it is important to note that the conduct of the Anambra governance election has further deepened this cynicism and reduced trust in the prospect of electoral integrity in 2027 and beyond. Many people in the hall believe that the 2027 presidential election would be rigged because the Tinubu administration has not manifested any commitment to electoral reform. These cynics point to the fact that since coming to power, President Tinubu has not made any major speech promising electoral reform. He has not taken any presidential action in support of electoral reform or set up an electoral reform committee to review the electoral regime. President Tinubu has done nothing about electoral reform. He has actually worsened the environment of electoral integrity by making partisan appointments into the electoral management body. This clear and incontestable evidence, piece of evidence, undermine faith in free and fair election in 2027. To add to this gloomy prognosis, cynics of electoral integrity make this telling statement, quote, Tinubu is not Jonathan, who conducted a free and fair election that ended his tenure. Tinubu is not a gentleman, no. Tinubu is Jagaban, end of quote. So this is the statements that underline the helplessness and hopelessness that we seem to face. Let me start by saying that this prognosis may be true. Obviously, Tinubu is not Jonathan. Obviously, the political landscape has shifted towards a more massive state capture. For the first time in a long while, everyone who has something to do with the management of electoral election is connected to the president, either by ethnicity or political alliance. President Tinubu has shredded the tacit understanding that incumbents choose the electoral umpire outside their ethnic or geopolitical bloc. There's a reason why that convention exists. We will not make a heavy weather of this. I mean, we're not supposed to be talking about ethnic and all that, but when we marry it together with the fact that the head of the security agency and the judiciary are all from the same ethnic group, and that Nigeria's politics has remained wedded to ethnicity more than anywhere else in Africa, as Crawford Young noted decades ago, we may come to understand the deep cynicism spreading across Nigeria and about the prospect of free and fair election. Before going further in this discourse, it's important to make some points clear. Nigeria has always had problems with credible election. The problem is as historical as it's widespread. It's also an African problem, as we see in all African post-colonial states. Credible elections have been the exception rather than the rule in Nigerian political history. Our elections are always rigged in one form or another. Of course, we've had a few elections who are generally adjudged as free and fair. Two that really come to mind are the 1993 presidential election and the 2015 presidential election. When Nigerians describe these elections as free and fair, it does not mean that there were no significant manipulation or frauds in those elections. Sometimes, elections has been acclaimed free and fair in Nigeria because the results align with public expectation, or that incumbents lost. And in the literature of elections, when incumbents lose election, they're actually a good indication that elections are likely free and fair. Because in politics, a political party will hardly hold power beyond 8 years. Because either their own failings or external factors will make electorates choose something else. So if incumbents keep on winning elections after 8 years cycle, the presumption is that those elections are not free and fair. And so we have used when incumbents lose as a major indicator of election. But it doesn't follow that those elections are truly free and fair. It's just that they are aligned with public expectation. So the point of this is not to revisit the debate about the 2015 election, but to point out that elections are usually rigged in Nigeria. It's the same story across Africa. So, and why is this so? Because the context of political power in society is defined by brutal control of political power and built on the foundation of a political economy of extreme exploitation would necessarily be extremely flawed. Elections would most likely be flawed in those conditions. The interplay of ethnocentric politics and the lack of accountability means that politics will not be mediated by a value of civility and respect for self-determination. So in a default mode, elections in Nigeria and other African countries would be flawed and likely fraudulent, as Justice Nsofo of the Supreme Court described when PDP was in power against Buhari. He said it's a flawed election. He said it's a sham, it's not an election. Interestingly, when President Buhari came to power, they didn't work hard to abolish that what created. And that's the problem with Nigeria. I think it's not that our leaders are bad. We should be very careful. The political economy of power means that it's usually, there's a disposition to continue flawed electoral system. And 3 points need to be made here. One is that the cost of elections are very excessive, that there are investments that are risk averse. So if you're going to spend 10 billion, for example, to run for a governorship election, which probably you borrowed from, your acceptance of failure will be minimal. The threshold is low because the risks are high. It could mean financial liquidation for you. So we need to come to a point where citizens themselves, and I'm going to say more about that, begin to invest in elections as part of civic contribution, in which case the politicians themselves will not have too many incentive to rig elections by all means. That's one. And number two, the general elections are not on and off stuff. They build on the existing civic culture. So if you have a culture of accountability and civility, elections will likely be fair. So I argue that the historical power dependency in electoral manipulation is further worsened by the economic and social benefit of winning elections and the enormous cost of losing it. Elections are determinant of economic and social success. This is because of the political economy of public office in Nigeria. There's so much to gain by winning election and getting to public office. This therefore increases the stakes in election and turns them from ladder to public service to deadly competition and struggle for power. So the political economy of public office makes elections all important and increases the disposition of candidates and politicians to consider election as warfare. Since all is fair in warfare, all is fair in election. Ironically, that is one of the reasons for the criminalization of elections in Nigeria. As Oxford political scientist and Nigerian expert Paul Collier rightly argued in his book, Wars, Guns, and Votes, Democracy in Dangerous Places, I focus on Nigeria. When elections become criminalized, it means that by a natural selection, only criminals can win election. And we're getting to that point where only criminals can win election because it's a natural selection. So somebody told me, Sam, you'll be a good governor, but you can't do what we're doing. And he's probably correct. And there's no way you can win if you can't do what is required to win. And that's why it's popular in Nigeria to say, when we say somebody should go to public office, the first question is, does he have capacity? Capacity translates to something, if not criminal, very close. So our language defines our reality. That politics, elections are now criminal undertakings. God forbid, at a point, all of us here will be at least less criminal enough to qualify for electoral contests. But the big issue is, why should we even bother? Look at the voting population in Enugu. I think it's still very low turnout in Anambra, very low turnout. In spite of all the concern, whether Soludo has done well, has not done well, people are still not voting. So, but why should we care about the quality of elections? There is a debate in political studies now around how much does democracy matter? The fact that non-democracies or even hybrid or even some what they call electoral autocracies, a few of them are doing very well. Stability, production of economic and social goods. People now say, why bother much about election? Think about how much you spend in election. Think about the post-election trauma and the fact that we are divided, elite consensus doesn't exist after election. And how much we could have gained economically in building national culture and development if there were no elections. So people say, but why bother? Now, let me cut to the chase. There are many arguments. Elections may not lead to development. But there's something that's important about election that nothing else does. Election is the only way a divided plural society can have peaceful transition. So even if free and fair election does not guarantee us economic development or social development, it guarantees us the possibility that we're going to have peaceful transition of power. And this is empirical. No country that has had real free and fair election has been trapped in conflict or war arising from secession. So even if the elections do not translate to democracy, the minimalist argument is that electoral democracy matters because it's one of the safe bets for conflict management, conflict avoidance in a plural society. And all societies today are plural. Whether either they are Christian, Muslim, religious, or ethnic, or social, or gay, lesbian, transgender, every society in today's world is a plural society. And that means that we must find a way to aggregate, to have peaceful competition, struggle between competing interests and values and ideologies, and elections, free and fair election, provide that process. Nigeria should also take elections seriously. The problem with nations, and this is what Gerard Diamond, the Columbia anthropologist, in his book argued. Societies collapse and disappear small by small. The fault lines increase. We are safe yesterday, so we use pattern. Tomorrow will be safe. Nigeria has had problems arising from election. All Nigeria's major crises, including the civil war, the proximate cause has always been disputes around rigged election. So if Nigeria was a wise person, it will prioritize free and fair election for its own stability. We're not even talking about development now. We're not saying give us free and fair election so that you grow the economy. Nigeria's chance of surviving into the next 20 years is very slim. Nigeria has one of the highest fragility index in the world. Nigeria is today the country with the lowest quality of life in the world. It doesn't matter what GDP is saying. This is clear. A country that has the two of the greatest terror groups in the index of terrorism is Nigerian-based. The country that has the lowest elite consensus is Nigeria. The country with the lowest innovation index in West Africa is Nigeria. The country that has the lowest infrastructure index is Nigeria. Now, this perfect storm means that Nigeria is perhaps one of the most threatened countries whose existence should no longer be taken for granted. And what that should mean is that there should be a consensus among elites to have free and fair election. Not for the purpose of the poor, but for the purpose of the elites. So one of the things that is remarkable about Nigeria is the lack of self-awareness. Nigeria is not even aware of how dangerous they are. Look at the Trump crisis now. We have trivialized it, turned it into skits. We are not competing on who is more psychopathic than the other. We are competing on who will praise government or attack government. And I can bet you, maybe there are no centers of real study and analysis around what should be done. A country like Nigeria should have a foreclosure on politics on some issues and say, let's bring the best and the brightest. Let's sit down and say, what should be done? So I've argued also here and elsewhere that Nigeria has two ironic features. We are very rigorous when it comes to our personal life. We hustle. Everybody wants to make it. We work hard. We think about how to survive. But we outsource the collective survivor to Lady Luck. All countries, selfishness is a great motivator for success. But self should expand to include the nation. The Nigerian problem is expanding the self from me, my family, maybe my ethnic group, to the nation. And that's why people don't care about elections. Because election is at the heart of election is public interestedness. If you care about free and fair election, you are caring about public good, because you should care about using violence and manipulation to get into power yourself. But to think about election means you must have public interest, because free and fair election is not for you, the winner, it's for the public good. And because Nigeria is notoriously a selfish people, we construct self very narrow. And that's why people have money, billionaires, the road to their mansion is terrible. They can't think about self in an expanded notion. And that's really why countries don't grow. All great countries must be able to conflict the personal self with that self called the nation. Now, so elections matter for Nigeria because without free and fair election, the prospect of Nigeria surviving is very low. Those who lose the election in Nigeria, I've heard some of us here talk about, look, we have to fire for fire. And it makes sense. If you can't win with votes, you can't be perpetually out of power. By the nature of human beings, everybody wants to have the assurance that if they work hard, they can get to power. Every ethnic group, social group believes that if they do a coalition well, they can win power. But if they are foreclosed because the process is not competitive, then they have no reason than to resort to self-help, and that's violence. So I would argue, before I go to what we should do, that we should begin to see the idea of free and fair election is not puritanic, it's not moral, it's real politics. It's the only way Nigeria can survive. If Nigeria continues to rig the elections like 2023 and we have been doing, in the next 3 or 2 electoral cycles, nobody will prepare for elections and people will prepare for war. And Nigeria cannot survive. Okay. Now, I move to the next point. So I've said that the real problem about 27 is actually the depth of cynicism. People don't believe. Because we make a mistake. Each time something happens in Nigeria that is bad, we absolutize it and we don't put it in context. I'll give 2 examples. Let's take, for example, the Supreme Court and what they did in Imo State. Where fought came first. It created a total collapse of social imagination and civic action. When I go for next election, people say, don't run. Which election are you running? Can you defeat this man who came fourth and became first? Fatalism is the Nigerian problem. We are not able to contextualize that this might have been an instance. Thunder may not strike twice. We're not able to find out how did it happen. What can be done to counter it next time? We give up and says, you can't fight a man who came fourth and got first. And that's why in the next election, there was no competition. That's where we are going to. People say, oh, Mr. A was not in government and was able to do what he did. Now he has all the power. Who can challenge him? My message today to us as citizens is that it is not true. Every outcome in history is dialectical. Something led to something. You can reverse it if you understand what led to that thing. That is how to make progress in life. We can have free and fair election if we match the energy of those who are rigging the election with the energy of those who want to protect the mandate. And I have 4 zones I have identified in my paper, 4 zones of activism. First is INEC. Because we are also not a rigorous people, one of the people who don't ask questions, we don't inquire, we don't read, we don't find out. INEC is much more than the INEC chairman. INEC is like a deep state. It's much more than the INEC Rex. Now, look at INEC. I have been fighting for, and I've been fighting that the president should no longer appoint INEC chair. But I think that's not really the problem with INEC. The problem with INEC is institutional. You have 37 Rex appointed via multiple political actors who recommend them. Each of them confirmed by the National Assembly. And they feel they have a mandate to deliver whatever interest they're there to do. You have EOs in each of the states who are responsible. You have admin secretaries who are competing with the REC. The question is this. Today, vice chancellors, the real competition for INEC for 2027 is in who becomes vice chancellor. So we might keep here talking about the integrity of Amuputan, whereas those who are running the election have used vice chancellors to create their own. If you look at EOs, so the question is, first thing we have to do is that we need to understand the INEC system. And rejig administrative have argued that INEC is one of the most incompetent and badly designed electoral management system in the world. I have some expertise in institutional reform. If you look at INEC as an organization, it's supposed to be a regulator. INEC does not follow any due process. How many political parties have a copy of INEC's business rule, a copy of INEC's process for making decisions? INEC's job is not transaction. It's not buying equipment, printing little. INEC's job is to regulate voting. So I think that the first spot for civic action is to see INEC as, let's not wait for INEC at the end point, outcome. Election is tomorrow. Let's open INEC to scrutiny, to accountability. Let's demand INEC to provide regulatory framework for decision making. And this is important. Do we know that INEC ought to have records? If INEC says INEC cannot come and announce INEC has decided, no. INEC will first issue a notice that they want to make a decision. INEC will ask for political parties to send in legally written briefs on that issue. INEC will go through and it said by vote of 3724, INEC ruled. And that decision will be published and made possible to become litigated. Now let's give an example in the US. Elections are done by counties. And they tell you that the counties met last week. They will televise, show you the result that 3-2, 2 Republicans, 3 Democrats, they voted to allow extend voting or to allow ballot paper or to allow one day. Whatever decisions about elections are made through a process that involves stakeholders, representation, and the public process. Record, on record, and vote. Nobody knows what. I give one example about INEC's crisis. In 23 primaries, PDP and other parties were asking INEC to extend the time. INEC said no extension of time, 0 extension. PDP had to struggle to do their primary. They had to rush in 2 days to get it done. That day, INEC extended it for APC to take 2 weeks more. No regulator in the world will ever do that because that's giving advantage to one person and not to the other person. So, first line of action, we have to see INEC just like any other public regulator. Look at the central bank. Central banks, BOG, Board of Governors, meet and they will publish to you that they have approved to keep MPR at 0. If you go to the record, you see who voted, what they said. Each person's vote is listed. That's how to run a regulatory agency. So INEC has to be engaged. INEC has to be litigated, challenged. And again, for politicians, you know, when the last election, I told Labour Party people, I said, I'm not a member, but I can help you one thing. Stop imperiling SAN after election. The work of legal litigation election starts when you declare candidacy. You challenge the INEC, you go to court, not after rigging. You will not be going to court. Senior advocates will deceive people, carry money, and eat. Electoral transparency is a process, and lawyers have to engage every way. So what's the point? We have made it easy for INEC to rig elections. The second zone of accountability and vigilance is political parties. Honestly, the last 2 weeks I've met with experts in this field and they have taught me, and I know that it's actually political parties who rig themselves because of lack of rigor. They assume too much. How can a political party want to win an election? It has no structure. Maybe with the exception of APC, the work people did. APC perhaps the only party that has, and I say it again, that has real commitment to watching elections. They have a good, system and processes. The other parties don't have the rigor to build a system. The party is a public trust. Fighting for election is in support of public good. So I think that the political parties should now see themselves as champions of electoral reform. They have outsourced to NGOs. If you call a meeting now, look at the National Assembly. They have, apart from a few of you, sir, with due respect, you've done very well in speaking out. How many oppositional legislators go to, they will be there, they will bring in partisan people as rec. They will not raise motion, counter it, challenge it. They will confirm them, only the political parties. I remember Yaga and Ezenwa went to court. I think Ezenwa went to court over one of the nominees. They went to court. No party supported them. So I want to blame the political parties for what they are not doing. They should be the ones actively fighting to block the process of electoral rigging. And they have to start challenging everywhere. Again, this is very important. Also, I want to acknowledge his former governor, Rotimi. You may not like his approach, but he has the level of madness that needed to match madness. That's very important. That's very important. You need madness to match madness. I don't mean violence, madness. I was telling somebody, if I'm a lawyer defending a political case, election case is a political case. It can't be there and the judge will make an order. INEC supply these people. They don't supply. SM will come to court. My lord, they have not supplied us, so it's okay. INEC, please supply them. They schedule trial. You go to trial. I used to be a lawyer with Chief Gani Foyemi. As we're leaving court, Gani will address press conference because it's a political case. It's not a case of nicety, it's politics. And in a third world country, my Oga Ojo Madekwe says, Sam, it's a third world country. We are a third world country means that the authoritarian dark practice and art is available every time. Judges are part of the connivance against democracy and fair election. You have to fight everybody. So the problem is that the lawyers themselves are co-conspirators. They have worked with these judges in several shady deals. I have to say it clearly. And they cannot come out and oppose their major client. But if you want to get 27 right, you must be people who say, we are going to fight. Fight judges, fight anybody who is against free and fair election. The third level of engagement, civil society. I want to say they have done well, but they should move away from donor-based activism for electoral reform. The donors are not really concerned about the real quality of election. They want to mark checklists. They have a checklist. They just say, it went well, it went well. No, these are Nigerian patriots focused on ensuring that elections are truly free and fair, because the consequence of lack of free and fair election is dangerous for national development. And finally, judiciary, the actors. I think we have to call a spade a spade. The reason why we have electoral jurisprudence is that judges reverse what politicians have done wrong. I have argued in my paper I wrote many years ago that there are 4 voters in a democracy. The first voter in a democracy is actually the party that presents a candidate. So they have voted that this is our candidate. The second voter in a democracy is actually the voters themselves. The third is the INEC, who declares the result. The court is a voter. And the court should use jurisprudence to protect the integrity of the choice made by electorates. I can't understand how senior advocates construct judicial electoral laws that put burden, too much burden, on those who complain about infringement, and then expect that you will be a scientist, collect everything in the country. Agencies will not give you results. They want you to collect, for example, they don't own is ridiculous. How can you penalize the petitioner that INEC came, subpoena to bring election results, came and dumped it? The judge says that you dumped evidence. So who dumped it? So he penalized the petitioner that evidence who should explain it? I think that the judges need a new orientation to see that their job is to help victims of electoral fraud, not to ask victims to do the impossible. And I will read a few things here which I've submitted as a proposal. First, it should be very clear on our electoral rules and regulations that once elections have been declared that are not on the IRF or false elections, the judge should mandatorily exclude those result sheets from votes. Simple. The law should be explicit. You can't have, the reason why we have IRF is to validate a process real time. And again, there should not be like collection of results. There should be no reason to collect results. Results end at the polling unit when they are counted. And so distinguish, the challenge should be that the simple things that need to be done, they always do the complex one. The simple thing is, the idea of election is that the voters express their will, free and fair. They express it freely and fairly counted. And I'll get back to the issue raised about vote buying. I don't care so much about vote buying as I care about accurate vote results. Elections depend on what the people want. If they are seduced by ideology, by I like this man, by TV, by rhetoric, or by inducement by money, it's a second-order moral crisis. The first-order moral crisis is whatever they vote, let it be declared as voted. So that's the litmus test of an electoral system, is that the people may be foolish, they may be stupid. If they vote, the vote should be clear. So for me, the design of electoral process is very simple. We must ensure that neither INEC nor politicians intervene between voting and result. And once vote has happened, Everybody can call the result. Once we do the tabulation online and you have won, and again, this is not rocket science. Thabo Mbakwe was able to defeat the rigging then because Mbakwe used IBC. In those days, NTA called result. Used IBC, the local radio, gathered on his result sheet, and declared himself a winner. And MPN could do nothing. Before election was due, Sam had declared himself the winner, and that's our bad spirit. That's what you need. You need to have your results and declare yourself a winner. We don't need to wait for INEC to do the ritualistic something, and one professor will fly to Lagos and they're waiting for Sokoto or from Gombe or whatever. The late night, you have a result come, and then after procedure, they say, we now do. No. That's formality. Winners emerge when the tabulation electronically has completed. Let me end by emphasizing 3 points. So this is a long paper. There is a typical Nigerian sentiment. Nigerians are very smart people individually, but collectively, I think we're not that smart. Because our system does not show that we put the same level of smartness into what we design. I want to make 3 appeals. First, that, and I know I could be punished for this, but I have to say it, as much as possible, please, those who are designing an electoral system should make sure you don't have too many senior advocates in the committee. The lawyers are the first real enemies of democracy. They don't know what they are doing. Electoral legal policy is not court. People who have read no sociology, no political science texts, because you have an SAN, which may be reward excellence for litigation, they will just insert themselves and be writing nonsense rules that make free and fair election impossible to do. I want to urge that we should use more of political science, sociologists, people who understand human behavior. Except the lawyer has shown that beyond going to court, he understands the process. Because I've read the rules and I see that lawyers have put their hand and they are confusing everything. Let's use less senior advocates and use people who know what they're talking about electoral systems and democracy. The second appeal is that we should now be clear in our mind that the government in power, in fact, all governments in power, will not want free and fair election. It's difficult to win the election when you are in power. Why? Because campaigns will never be the same as performance. And some of the performers are beyond their control. So people in power will do everything to undermine free and fair election. It's our responsibility to overcome them, to fight them. So if you really care for electoral reform, then you should care that you are fighting against the incumbent. A few incumbents will do well and be re-elected, but oftentimes, incumbency is difficult in a democracy. Look at what happens in midterm in the US. Why do all presidents lose midterm? Do they suddenly lose their brain when they get to power? It's because everything that happens is your fault. Every local problem is attributed to you. And that's why it's difficult to win a second term or even fourth term as a political party. So I want to appeal to Nigerians to understand that fighting for free and fair election would sometimes mean fighting against the government in power, because they have the incentive and opportunity to rig election. And the third appeal I want to make is this. I think Nigerians should adopt a national slogan or a credo that says, in God we trust, every other person provide evidence. Nobody should be acclaimed to be honest until they have done their job. The notion that once somebody is appointed is a professor, is this, and people started already disarming themselves. Instead of, you should be cynical about the person's capability and therefore hold him to account. We should stop this national religion of always claiming that we are too good, the smartest people, holiest people. Everybody in Nigeria is an icon. Anybody who dies is a legend. Everybody who gets office is a good man. We should stop that cultural practice that entraps us in a cul-de-sac of error and failure. By the time elections end, you'll be too late.